Come, follow me. You know, it's probably one of the most universally famous and powerful spiritual invitations in all of human history. Whether you're deeply religious, maybe just culturally curious, or a student of history, you've absolutely heard these words before. But when we strip away the familiarity, what are these words really asking of us? Today, we're going to unpack the profound implications of this simple three-word phrase. Let's dive in. So what does it actually mean to follow? Does true discipleship just mean adopting a set of safe daily habits that gently improve our lives over time? Or does it demand something much, much more intense, like an absolute radical surrender, where you drop everything you know and just walk into the unknown? Throughout history, people have interpreted this call in wildly different ways, and the results have been both deeply inspiring and, frankly, incredibly dangerous. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to break down this whole concept of discipleship across what is honestly a fascinating spectrum. We're going to look at how modern, structured religions guide their followers today, and then we're going to contrast that with one of the most controversial and radical interpretations of the 20th century. By the end of this, you'll have a completely new perspective on what happens when humans try to answer that age-old call to follow. Here's a quick roadmap for our explainer today. We'll start with the universal invitation, then look at structured modern discipleship. From there, we'll dive right into Osho's radical interpretation, examine the rise of Rajneesh, and finally, weigh the cost of following. Section 1. Structured Modern Discipleship. When we talk about following a spiritual path today, you'll notice that most modern institutional faiths have developed these really safe, well-organized frameworks. Take a look at this striking parallel between two totally different Christian denominations. The Episcopal Church is actually publishing a new devotional titled Come, Follow Me, and they define discipleship as living a life shaped by grace and community. Meanwhile, the LDS Church has this massive home curriculum, also titled Come, Follow Me, which is aimed at deepening conversion right inside the home. It's fascinating because both are using the exact same historical invitation, but they're using it to create manageable, structured devotion. And this right here shows you what that structure looks like on a daily basis. The curriculum isn't asking you to, quit your job or go live in a desert. Instead, it gives you actionable, everyday steps, mark verses that inspire you, listen to the Spirit, ask questions, keep a study journal. It's very safe, it's predictable, and it's completely built to strengthen your existing life. But what happens when someone looks at those exact same words, come follow me, and decides that this modern approach completely misses the point? Which brings us to Section 2, Osho's radical interpretation. To understand this radical shift, we really have to look through the lens of the 20th century Indian mystic Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who you probably know as Osho. He frequently spoke about that biblical story where Jesus calls the fishermen. Well, according to Osho, when Jesus said, "Come, follow me," they dropped their nets instantly. They didn't go consult a study guide, right? Furthermore, when another man asked to go bury his dead father first, Jesus replied, "Let the dead bury the dead." To Osho, true trust means not looking back. It means an immediate surrender where you drop your past entirely. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone agree to that level of radical surrender? Well, Osho tapped into a very deep, very real modern anxiety. He argued that while technology creates immense comfort for us, it actually makes humans feel completely disposable and useless. As he saw it, science can build better houses, for sure, but it cannot create a better human being. It cannot create a Buddha. Osho's theory was that our tech-driven society leaves us completely starved for meaning, and that makes the human need for overwhelming purpose greater than ever before. So, to combat this modern alienation, Osho taught a philosophy of absolute affirmative living. He taught that saying yes is essentially a mantra, a literal bridge to God. He believed Jesus was the ultimate man of yes, someone who surrendered even to his own death on the cross. Conversely, he taught that saying no isolates you. It creates the ego and cuts you off from the universe. Basically, to follow Osho, you had to become a total yes-sayer, someone who surrendered completely to existence, and, by extension, to the master himself. Let's move to Section 3, the rise of Rajneesh. Because it's one thing to talk about philosophy, right? It's a whole other thing to actually put it into practice. Looking at the timeline of Osho's global movement, the rise is just astonishing. Back in 1953, at just 21 years old, he claimed enlightenment. By 1974, his Pune ashram was attracting thousands of Westerners who were actively seeking that radical surrender. Then, in 1981, the movement made this audacious leap. They bought a massive ranch in Oregon and built their own functional city, Rajneeshpuram. But This utopian experiment collapsed rapidly, ultimately leading to his arrest and deportation from the US in 1985. During their time in America, there was this one staggering number that basically became the ultimate symbol of the whole movement. 93. That is the number of Rolls-Royces his followers gifted to him. 93. Now, while outsiders obviously saw it as gross hypocrisy, Osho claimed it was a deliberate provocation, a way to mock the American obsession with wealth. But regardless of the intent, it required absolute, unquestioning financial and personal devotion from his disciples to make that literal fleet of luxury cars a reality.
This leads us to Section 4, the cost of following.
So what happens when discipleship stops being a daily habit and turns into absolute blind surrender to a human guru? Well, the factual events that dismantled the Rajneeshpuram commune were incredibly severe. To take over the local county politically, the commune bussed in homeless people. They were implicated in a massive mass salmonella poisoning in the nearby town of the Dollies. There were widespread immigration fraud charges and even an attempted murder charge. Furthermore, as we've seen highlighted in documentaries like Wild Wild Country, there were highly documented accounts of neglect and child abuse within the commune. This is the tragic, factual dark side of extreme, unquestioning devotion. To sort of summarize this entire paradox, philosopher Sam Harris noted something really profound. He observed that Osho seemed like a genuinely insightful man who honestly had much to teach, but who grew intoxicated by the power of his role and then finally lost his mind in it. Think about it. When a spiritual leader demands dozens of Rolls-Royces and total surrender, they have clearly wandered off the path. It perfectly captures how a philosophy of radical trust can just completely warp when it's in the hands of a flawed human leader.
We have traveled across the entire spectrum of what it means to follow. On one end, we see the safety and the stability of institutional study guides, which encourage us to read a little each day and integrate faith safely into our modern lives. But on the absolute opposite end, we see the thrilling yet deeply perilous mysticism of Osho, where following meant dropping your entire life and surrendering your autonomy entirely.
Which leaves us with this final, deeply provocative question. Where exactly is the fine line between structured devotion and blind surrender? At what point does healthy spiritual discipline tip over into dangerous fanaticism? And honestly, when you hear the words, "Come, follow me," what are you actually willing to leave behind? I hope this explainer has left you with a whole lot to think about. Until next time, keep questioning and keep learning.